district plan provisions for centres in Wellington event on day 7, believe we are. So we welcome virtually Mr. Ford for the Disabled Persons Assembly of New Zealand. Welcome, Mr. Ford. Hopefully you can hear us okay.
I can indeed. Morena, kia ora koutou.
Kia ora. So we have got your written statement here, but please do feel free to spend what time you need to traverse the key points of your submission, and then hopefully we'll may have some questions for you afterwards. So the floor is yours.
Sorry, you were just cutting out there.
Okay, no, we'll hand over the table to you to talk to your submission, Mr. Ford.
Thank you very much. As was stated at the beginning, I'm Chris Ford, Acting Kaituitui Community Connector for WELLington Disabled Persons Assembly DPA New Zealand. As of this week, I am actually the Regional Policy Advisor and the Kaituitui for Wellington, and the other role I also hold for Ōtepoti Dunedin has been folded into that larger role. DPA is providing the submission for the Wellington City Council in consideration of the proposed district plan for the city. We've focused our submission on accessibility to housing and to the urban environment. The brief background to this is that, as commissioners and everyone in today's hearing knows, Wellington is bearing the brunt of the country's housing crisis. Specifically, disabled people are disproportionately bearing the burden of this crisis due to the inaccessibility of much of our private housing stock, not only in Wellington, but throughout the country. Lifemark Universal Design, a company owned by CCS Disability Action, and which specialises in universal design for both housing and public buildings, estimates that only between 2% and 5% of Aotearoa's public housing stock is fully accessible to disabled people. This is a shocking indictment on decades of building housing, which is largely inaccessible to disabled people, aiding in the creation of a disabling society. At a practical level, this means that for disabled people like me and others who have a need for accessible housing, there is practically nowhere to live, even despite the small infinitesimal increase in accessible housing numbers through, for example, Kāinga Ora and other social housing providers over the last 4 years in particular. This lack of accessible housing and supporting community infrastructure means that many disabled people are not able to live in the communities we would like to live in, or even visit whānau, family, friends, or anyone for that matter, as visitability is not a primary consideration in any current housing planning processes either. That serves as the background to the submission from DPA. Now, I will deal briefly with some of the technical highlights from our submission. DPA has some concerns about the proposed intensification process around zoning for housing, which has been instituted via amendments made to the Resource Management Act by Parliament. These stem from the fact that many of the houses which may well be built will be no more than 3 stories in height on average. Nevertheless, these concerns have been mitigated by the proposal to adopt accessibility guidelines as part of this proposed district plan in the form of the Centres of Mixed Use and Residential Design Guides. DPA welcomes and supports the introduction of these guidelines. However, DPA has made various proposals around strengthening the wording of several key clauses to encourage greater uptake of universal design and accessibility by planners, developers, builders, and homeowners as the best way of ensuring that both present and future generations of disabled Wellingtonians can access
Yes, Mr. Ford? Frozen.
Housing, take the construction of.
Can
You
you
want-
hear us? Sorry,
Yes.
you froze a couple of places then. I don't know if there's anything you can do your end to sort of increase the bandwidth at all.
I don't know how to do that, but
Okay.
anyway.
You are reading to your statement, so that we have that in front of us. So
No, that's fine. So I've just complete
You
reading
popped on.
that.
okay,
And yep, I'm very sorry that the
That's
rest
all
of the audience who will see this later recording will actually miss out on some of this. Anyway, also, just coming back to what I was saying. However, DPA has made various proposals around strengthening the wording of several key clauses to encourage a greater uptake of universal design and accessibility by planners, developers, builders and homeowners as the best way of ensuring that both present and future generations of disabled Wellingtonians can access housing of various types, thereby affording disabled people greater housing choices. Also, if done well, this proposed district plan will facilitate the construction of more accessible public buildings, urban infrastructure and housing, which will enable disabled people to be included in all of Wellington's communities. Specifically, we refer panel members to the amendments we have proposed around strengthening various provisions of the Centres and Mixed Use Guide. For example, we call for the insertion of the word must in section G37 of the Centres and Mixed Use Guide, where it discusses that, for example, entrances should be of adequate dimensions to provide universal access for all and allow for movement from a wide range of users, including moving furniture and wheelchairs. This is as we believe that entrances must be of adequate dimensions to enable, for example, wheelchair and mobility aid users the ability to easily manoeuvre in and out of houses and buildings built to these specifications. The same applies with section G91, when it talks of four developments that are likely to be occupied by people with limited mobility, where possible, provide ground level access that is accessible by people using wheelchairs and design units with reference to New Zealand standards for access and mobility. Excuse me, we believe that considers such things as should be amended to state ensure things such as to encourage greater compliance and uptake from stakeholders, including builders, designers, and future homeowners. Similarly, in the residential design guide, we make several recommendations around strengthening provisions, such as that, for example, around section G37, we would suggest the deletion of the words where possible and a replacement with the sentence ensuring that dwellings on the ground floor have a step-free entry. We make similar recommendations around the need to amend residential design guide sections G53, G76, G78, and G81. One area I would like to draw panelists' attention to is the use of language in the proposed district plan document as well. In section G53, for example, the term limited mobility users is not that clear or disability friendly, and in its place, we have suggested using the term people with mobility impairments to better capture and specify whose needs are being catered for within this section. Overall, we support the proposals made around building accessibility and design in the commercial and mixed use centre zone and in the high density residential zone, particularly when it comes to ensuring the widest choice of housing possible in the Wellington region. This can best be done through using the city outcomes contribution via the Environmental and Accessibility Performance Fund to incentivise the building of housing and public buildings as we outline on section HRZ P13. I would now welcome any questions that the hearings panel has on our submission and specific aspects of it. Panel Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. And just for the record, your statement is up online as well. If people do want to read the full statement, they can go there. And also, just for your benefit, Mr. Ford, I don't know if you're aware, but the comments on the design guide, there's a separate process occurring outside the hearing process at the moment where all of the design guides are being sort of revisited in terms of their consistency and their formatting and their structure.
I wasn't aware of that.
All right. No, they came up in the hearing on the residential provisions way back whenever that was, March. But we are listening to submissions on the design guides as part of our wrap-up hearing, which is in September, I think.
Okay.
But we will take these forward. I'm not necessarily saying you have to come back and repeat everything, because the panel here will be on that wrap-up panel as well. So we will take forward your comments here and mesh them into that process as well. So thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ford?
Thank you, Mr. Ford. I've been in the planning game a long time, and universal accessibility has been a key theme that is coming through all through that time. Do you feel that there is a relationship between the Building Act and what the Building Act says in terms of accessibility, and whether there is sort of a boundary in between what we can consider and what the Building Act says that a building owner must comply with, particularly in relation to access to public buildings?
That is a real issue, because the Building Act has not been updated since 2004. It obviously doesn't cover, for example, what private residential dwelling should be, but it only makes specific reference to accessibility in respect of public buildings and spaces. That's the real limitation. That's the first limitation. The second limitation is that it really, for example, as we point out in our submission, is that if, for example, with the intensification process, there will be more buildings built to 3 stories in height, residential housing built to 3 stories in height. However, under the current building legislation, there is no requirement to put in lifts or other means of mobility access into anything more than 3 stories. So that's the minimum height that is required before a lift can be installed in a private dwelling. That is something that really has to be worked around currently, and I guess that from the comments that have been coming from disabled people in the WELLington community, for example, it is felt that if there are more than 3, that there have to be more buildings of more than 3 stories in height, then at least a ground floor apartment would be better in each unit, which is made accessible for everyone, that is built to universal design standards. However, we would like to encourage, as DPA, the widest extension of accessibility possible, but I think it will take, obviously, an amendment to the Building Act or a complete rewrite of the legislation to do that. Also, members may or may not be aware that there has been a report back from the Parliamentary Social Services Select Committee on the Accessibility for New Zealanders Bill, and that bill has been widely criticised, critiqued by the disabled community, including DPA, for not having accessibility guidelines or standards incorporated as part of it. Okay. So those sorts of issues are present, but we want to see as much as possible instruments such as district plans making as much difference in terms of access as possible for disabled people as can be legally done. I think that district plans can make a significant difference in encouraging, at least under the current legislative environment, accessibility, including in housing design and construction.
Okay, thank you. There's obviously a number of different factors in play, not only the district plan and the Building Act, but if you're looking at social housing providers, for example, there is various different levers that the social housing providers can look at in terms of, a percentage of residential units, which may be up to the requirements of for people with disabilities. Is that a fair comment? There's lots in play here.
Yes, well, for example, GPA are very supportive of calls by our members, and not only that, the wider disabled community who we represent, for kainga ora, which is the New Housing New Zealand, to make all of their housing, their new stock of housing 100% universal design accessible, but kainga ora just sort of saying no to that. However, if they can get to 100% or close to it, then that would be ideal for us. That's just an example. I know that really that social housing is often for many disabled people the only sort of viable option, but there are obviously, as maybe you've had testimony as well from kainga ora and other social housing providers, there's a real demand out there. But I think that in reality, I live, by the way, just out of a declaration of interest, that I live in a kainga ora unit in Ōtepoti, Dunedin, where I reside. So, yeah, I have to say that for me personally, trying to find housing is quite difficult, as it is for many, many disabled people. And so that's why we've put in such a strong submission on this district plan, and because I think Wellington is going in the right direction, but it needs to, I think the city needs to be prodded even further and to become a good example for the rest of the country.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. I don't have any particular questions, but well, maybe just one. Have you been involved with district plans around the country, or is this the first one that you've been involved in?
Well, I have done district plans in other places like Ōtepoti, Dunedin, obviously, but that was years ago. However, this is the first sort of plan I've really been able to understand. It's sort of first planning process I've been able to understand, and I have to say that the friend of submitters has been very helpful, if I might put that in there, around this. So I've received pretty good advice in that regard on how to prepare the submission.
That's really good to hear. I guess my question, the reason I asked my question was I just wondered what other places were doing in their district plan to maybe facilitate some of the things that you're requesting, whether they're all relying on design guide process or whether there were other
I'm not aware. I'm currently not aware, sorry. I've
That's
only
okay.
I've only been in the role of regional policy advisor for 15 hours a week for about over a year, and district planning processes around the country for 87 local authorities can be quite time consuming, but however, as we focus, given the resources we do have as DPA on the main centres at the moment, then we see Wellington as, I saw Wellington as one area where we could make a difference, and where, as I've said earlier, that it was going in the right direction in terms of universal design and accessibility around those planning guides in particular. I'm not aware of any other place around the country that does them, but if I do encounter them, I'll let you know.
Thank you very much. Your submission is very clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. I've been sitting in earlier hearings as well, and I have actually read your earlier submissions with regards to wording in particular. And it seems the council has taken that on board and has actually provided alternative wording that includes the wording you have provided. And I'm pretty sure that with regards to the design guides, we will be able at the wrap-up hearing to make sure that your concerns will be heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
And only just a question of clarification, Mr. Ford, from me. So the key elements to your submission relate to accessibility into and out of buildings, door widths within the building, and also some concern around multi-storied buildings in terms of their ability to. Are there any other elements of design that are should also be taken into account in terms of accessibility and movement?
Okay, well, I'm just looking through the submission I wrote now, and I think, for example, we talked about providing communal spaces for social interaction, making sure that they were accessible. On sloping sides of a balcony or a deck can be an acceptable design response. We talk about all those sorts of things and strengthening the wording around that. And we also talked about even things such as, for example, making sure that the integrating large-scale plant fixtures such as vents and transformers are as explicit and coherent parts of the overall architectural composition. And we talked about all of those sorts of matters needing to be amended in terms of the fact that accessibility needs to be recognised as important, because if there are barriers such as transformers being built, then we need to have safe spaces, does everyone, to navigate around those.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, thank you for being very clear and clarifying the key changes that you are seeking. It's much appreciated.
Most
So
certainly,
thank you,
Chair.
Ford. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Kite. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dave. We are early, but I'm wondering whether our next submitters are ready to go. Partly virtual and partly in person. Well, I can see the in-person element.
Just waiting for Jazz to come and set up the video.
All right. Yep. Stop. Put it in hand.
She's might just be a few minutes.
Okay. We're just taking pause while you do that. I will just say while we're doing that, don't let me stop you. We have got your submissions in front of us, and that includes the written statements from Mr. Brodie.
Yeah.
And we've got the submission from Moths and Butterflies as well. We did pay a visit to the site last Wednesday morning.
It's cold.
It was cold. It'd be colder today, I bet you. Cold and wet. But so we have got an appreciation of the site and its surroundings. So we will hear from you with that in mind.
Did you go into Twiglands? Did you go inside?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
We'll go in Twiglands, yeah.
Yeah.
So would you
To the left. Okay.
please come to the table and we'll hand it over to you.
Kia ora, my name's Claire Bibby. I'm not going to read my submission because you've read it already, but I will speak to it. So we submit that the address of 238 and 236 Middleton Road are not suitable for the proposed height controls and recession planes, as future development would shade the stream and the adjacent open space on 246 Middleton Road, making it an unhealthy green space. Oh, it's already turned on to the next one. Does it do it automatically?
No, you should be able to manually.
There's a different picture here, but anyway, The address is very close to the stream and bound by a significant historic house, scheduled site, historic reserve, scheduled but not yet recognised as such in the proposed district plan, and a heritage garden. So we should just go, now we're away, yeah. Future development on 236 and 238 Middleton Road must enable sunshine for growing riparian plants along the stream, enhance stormwater management and the continuation of a healthy garden with heritage planting on the adjacent heritage reserve. Just flick through a few of these pics too. Doesn't seem to be, Jazz, it's not going through.
Bit of a lag on it.
Maybe there is. It's got just got a little bit of a lag. Yeah, okay, that's cool. To this end, we seek a reduction in the height controls, a change to the height in relation to boundary recession planes and recognition of 246 Middleton Road as a historic reserve. And we also ask that water management be given a 3-dot priority in the MUS. I'm just going to call it the MUS to make it easier. Yeah. Right, so I'll just go back a bit here. Now, all this can be achieved through the subpart 6 intensification in Tier 1 urban environments in the National Policy Statement. 3.31, 3.32 and 3.33 refer to qualifying matters. So they can actually modify the proposed district plan as if there are qualifying matters, and there's a whole list under 3.32 of in the National Policy Statement of qualifying matters, and this site actually achieves a lot of them. 3.32b, any matter required for the purpose of ensuring the safe, efficient operation of nationally significant infrastructure. Or downstream, you've got the national gas pipeline follows Middleton Road, you've got the electricity line follows Middleton Road for the houses and along there, you've got the main water that carries down to Tawa, you've got the main sewer line that takes all the sewage from the northern suburbs down to Porirua, you've also got the railway line, and you've got the only alternative road to the motorway. So that's all national significant infrastructure. It's also adjacent to open space, provided for public use. It's an area subject to a designation. And they also talk in there under subsection E about only in relation to the land that's subject to the designation, and that's why it's important for us to have the historic reserve recognised, that it is actually there. And I've searched all the council documents and it was really hard to find any reference to historic reserves, but they haven't actually put them on their plan, and they should be, so that the decision makers in planning and the landowners adjacent know that they're purchasing next to a historic reserve. And there might be some implications for that. For us as gardeners, we have to have an archaeological authority to do anything in that reserve. It's also under G, the requirement to provide sufficient business land suitable for low density use to meet expected demand. Well, I think Twidlands is an appropriate low density use, and it's a good one. And there's also another one under F, to ensure consistency with iwi, and I see that the stream is significant to iwi. So there's not just one qualifying matter, there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 out of the 7 that this meets under the opportunity to amend the plan. So it's open space. It's scheduled as scheduled reserve, but there's no reference to its historic reserve status, and it should be, so that people in the MARS are aware of that when they make decisions for 236 and 238, because it's not just about protecting the house, it's about protecting the reserve and the garden and the open space on it. That green on there is the area that's the historic reserve, so that it's all part of open space, and it is open space. I've checked with the council, but open space only has a recession plane of 60 degrees. A bit more is needed here because it's historic, adjacent to historic reserve. And the design guide actually for mixed use doesn't require any acknowledgement of the heritage design guide, so that isn't relevant to the heritage design guide is for places that are heritage sites, whereas the MUS uses the mixed use design guide. It does, however, have reference to, and I've marked them there, heritage, saying that the guidelines are essential and must be applied. And that's why it's really important that the whole land block is included in there as historic as well. So it's not just important for the house, but also the whole reserve, so that correct decision making takes place. And you can see the two houses on the reserve and adjacent to the reserve are marked, but that's all that's marked on the site, nothing on this plan, not the actual historic reserve. And there's not very many of them. I think there's only about 5 in council. I think one's the government buildings, one is the Alexander Turnbull house. I think there's 2 iwi ones that aren't going to get built out because they're adjacent to the sea, and there's this one. So it's actually quite rare to have historic reserves. So we're asking for a 45-degree recession plane adjacent to historic reserves. It's not going to impact, but if the council don't say, well, actually that's not feasible to do that for all historic reserves, certainly on this one it can be done. So this is the entrance to the halfway house which you looked at. So in 1849, that earlier halfway house was pretty much located where the Twidlands car park is today, and it was sketched there, and it was sketched by New Zealand's first botanist, Martha King, who stopped there for the night, and it was also sketched by a surveyor for the Porora Road. Today it's known as the Old Porora Road because the motorway replaced it as the state highway. I took this photograph to show you the entrance because it leads to several important public places. On the left, we've just got some new tracks put in on the Glenside Reserve, just by the sign there. The council put those in, and that's the only public walkways, you know, like recreational walkways for the entire Glenside suburb. If you go straight ahead, you go down to the main reserve, which we're working with council now to get funding in a long-term plan, is a wildlife trust, like a natural wetland area and natural site. And straight ahead is the historic halfway house and its historic garden. And there's another building on the site, which is the caretaker's house, which is up on top of the hill. So the photograph shows the single level buildings adjacent to the reserve, which are on old swampland. That's why they're low, because it's going down to the stream. If the 15-metre height restriction on the MUS goes through, this entrance would become a narrow, dark alleyway, and the ground level where Twidlands is would be lifted up because fill would be needed and to be compacted because it is an old wetland. So your ground level is actually going to go up as well, from which then they can build up taller. So it's be more than 4 to 5 metres that we got. 15 metres, they'd actually go up higher because they probably need a metre of fill in there. This is a bird's eye view of the boundaries the 15-metre height restriction covers, which is, you can sort of see that down the lane and all around the lawn that would be enclosed with that 15-metre height. What I did is I put it in a contour drawing because it actually is a little bit easier to follow there. So what I actually might get up to point this out, a bit easier than trying to fiddle with the machine. So what you've got here, this is right behind the house. This is really steep. These are metre distances between these contour lines. So this is showing it's steep. Here it's recessed. So this is quite a valuable picture in showing the recession plane that's natural. So if your level's about 69 metres above sea level, when you get up to here, it's 90. So that's 20 metres. So you can get a real good feel for what it would be like in terms of shading if it was on the other side. That's why I wanted to show you that, because I then took some pictures to show you on a sunny day what the effect is of that height, put it restriction, those heights on that side. So this is showing you at, I took this just a couple of days ago, that's 9:19 AM. So it's all in shade, there's no sun, because of the hill that's blocking it. And this, that's taken so half an hour later, and you're just starting to get the light coming because of the recession plane. This is the value of the recession. Now sunrise was at 10 to 8. This is now 10 to 10 roughly. So 2 hours later, we still don't have any sun. That's looking in the other direction at the same time. Now, if they build multi-stories on the adjacent boundary, which they can do, we would end up, I worked it out, the maths, so you're talking like 2.5 to 3, 7, 8, 2 hours. So your sun sets at 5, which would make it 3. So you're looking, but you're only going to have sunlight sort of between 11 and 2:30, sort of 11 to 2. You're not going to have much sun in there at all because of the shading, which is why we're saying please to the council not to do that, because essentially the house will just be and the land, the garden will just be dark and have no light in the winter. They'll only get it for like 3.5 hours. So we're saying retain the original 8-metre heights, make sure that the interactive map and the property report for 26 Middleton Road have a scheduled heritage historic reserve on there as well, and include a new section that the boundary adjoining any historic reserve has a recession plane of 45 degrees measured from a height of 3 metres vertically above ground level. That just going back to here, why that's not planted is it's a staged program. So the other 2 areas are more intensively planted. This is stage 3 and we haven't started on this one at the moment. But I just find it rather ironic that this week I just heard that the residents in the Monterey apartments want those trees cut down because it's blocking their light. And so they're going to do that. They're going to crown the trees along the stream so they get more light. But those houses are actually set back a good 5 metres from the boundary, and they're already finding that the light is blocked. We're not objecting to that. We support them having the light, and we've been very careful with our plant selection. Twiglands don't want any trees on their boundary, and we've respected that as well. So we're looking at turning this area, there's a daffodil, 300 daffodils planted on there, and we're going to put a rose wall and maybe an orchard arbor along there. So it won't affect their light and the growing of their plants. This is the only flat land in our suburb. We've got no other flat land that's public land. This is the lawn, the marquee lawn for events, which we do hold down there for community. It's a very steep, rugged valley. Now, the other issue we've got is I think this is just an oversight from the council, and I've brought it to your attention, but they haven't changed it, so I now have to do it this way through speaking with you. So they say that it's a 15-metre height restriction in the MUS under R16(1), but we're not mentioned here. That's fine, we don't want to be mentioned here. We actually want an 8-metre height restriction. We don't want to be on there. But then they've got us down in the 22-metre height restriction, but we're not in that area. We're not under that R16(2), but Churton Park is, and that's their village area. That's 22 height metre, but they're not mentioned in here. We are, so it should be changed from Greenside to Churton Park. They've got it in the wrong. They haven't got Churton Park in here at all. So that's a mistake on their part, and that needs to be fixed. So we're asking for that to be corrected, that the 22 metres is corrected. And I just want to talk about the water. We think the water has not been given a high enough priority. They haven't shown the underground streams on this map, and they're quite significant as well. So there's a stream here that flows under those apartments. They actually moved it. It came out by Twiglands. This is Twiglands. That's the other area. That's 236. That's 238. That's the reserve. It's a stream here that carries all the water from Newlands and Johnsonville down to Porirua. It's not a daylighted stream. It's been piped, and that whole site of the Twiglands site is a flood hazard area. It's really important to understand the significance of that stream. It probably looked very benign when you were there, even though it was raining. It comes up really high, really fast. This was taken in floods of February 2001, I think 2002. And that's a debris arrestor that's halfway down Middleton Road to stop the debris going down to Tawa and taking out all the bridges and crossings for the railways and the businesses, etc. downstream. that debris is coming up out of the ground, or it's when it lifts up when the stream moves, or it's coming off the erosion off the sides of the stream. So this is an example just downstream from Twiglands. That was in November. You can see the erosion undermining the properties along the stream. And that's what this next picture, if it comes up. Why is it not moving? It's not showing the next one for some reason. There it is. That's what came out of the sides of the banks then. You can see the railway line there just above it. And this here is further down near Willow Bank. So the property on the left is showing the inside of the person's boundary when it's in flood, and look how much it's dropped. That's a good, I'd say that's a good 2 metres, 1.5 to 2 metres of the flood dropping with all the damage. And this was just taken last year. This was Cyclone Dovey. So the stream is, the height of the stream is very high there. You can't tell how high it is, but it's undermined the bank and it's taken down a tree which has landed on the people's access bridge over to their house. And on the other side, looking north, it's taken a tree out on the other side of the stream and blocked the alternative route to the highway. I personally don't think that the City Council people really understand the stream here, because we don't get the newspaper coverage and they don't visit. Here they do understand the road. They're very quick to, it's a priority road for clearing it from erosion, but I don't think they would be putting a 4-storey height, 50-metre height restriction on Twiglands if they understood the impact of the stormwater and the flooding that occurs in the area. So just to summarise, we reject the 15-metre height controls on 236 and 238 Middleton Road and ask they be retained at 8 metres. We seek to remove Glenside from the MUS R16.2 height control area 5 with a maximum height of 22.5 metres. We seek a recession plane of 3 metres height and 45-degree angle on the boundary of historic reserves, and alternatively on the boundary of 238 Middleton Road and 246 Middleton Road. We seek a reference in the district plan that the interactive map and the property report for 246 Middleton Road include a scheduled historic reserve, so the whole site, not just the house, is recognised in MUS decision making. And we do support the references to heritage and vegetation and water in the MUS design guide, but we seek an increase to a 3-dot rating for designing with water section in the guide. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Brody, do you want to?
Yeah.
Do
I just speak into this now?
yeah, if the green light is on, you just press that button until the green light comes on.
It's on.
It's on. Great. Fantastic. Turn mine off.
So next. Coming from 40 years in the horticulture industry, and spending 20 years in the pit fruit industry, I also have 100 years behind me of a family that was in the pit fruit industry. So I've got a great experience in horticulture. I'm really concerned about the possibility of 3 stories high apartments being built along the Twiglands boundary. And if just hearing from what Claire said, I didn't realise it was, they're going to go up to 15 metres from 8. Because that's the possibility they do that, it's going to reduce light in the gardens, and it's also going to reduce the natural airflow. Now, I'm not too sure which direction the wind goes, southwesterly, northwesterly, but gardens need air, they need sunlight, and it's really important that you have that. If you build 15-metre apartments, as we've seen with in the winter time, if you've only got 3 hours of sunlight, you're not going to have much drying time for gardens. You're not also getting a lot of light. Plants need light for photosynthesis, and for the health of the plants and the fruit trees. If that is the case and that happens and they build those apartments at 15 metres, I was at Chirton Park because I do a bit of relief teaching. I was just saying to Claire before, And I look down from Churton Park, and when you look at the whole thing as a square, that Monterey Apartments is like that. If you build those apartments there, you've only got the hillside. You've got 4 sides to a square. 2 sides of that square are blocked. Does that make sense? Because if you go higher up, you've got 2 sides that are going high up. You've only got the hillside and that road where the light and air comes in. If the airflow comes through at 8 meters, maybe that's not too bad, but at 15, you're cutting the airflow, the natural airflow through that area. Now, with the result of not having enough sunlight, enough air, enough light coming into your trees and plants, the problem you've then got is you've got the possibility of fungi, and you get infections like black spot, powdery mildew, downy mildew, brown rot, sooty mold, bacterial spot, and botrytis as fungal infections. Then you've got pests and diseases. You've got pests like leaf roller, codling moth, scale, mite. If there is not enough airflow going through a plant, that's why, when you prune a fruit tree, you open it up so birds and light can flow through. If it's like this, which will result from the apartments, because there's nothing to go through, you are stopping the natural things of life. And I'm really concerned that I'm not so much concerned with the fact that apartments are going to be built, but my concern is going from 8 meters to 15 meters. I think there'll be a detrimental effect on the gardens and fruit trees and rose bushes on the Glenside Historical Site.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're having technical problems with Ms. Knight. She's unable to get online at the moment. But as I said before, we have got the statement from Moths and Butterflies before us, and we have read it. Thank you for that. Are you open to questions from the panel?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just one from me. Obviously we visited this site. What is clear to me that the boundary of concern to you is generally on the south to west side of the site. So that I would imagine that the actual effect of shading from any building on that boundary would be relatively limited in terms of times of day and times of year for that, if it's on the southwest.
It gets the afternoon sun.
Mm.
So if there's the heights are there, it's going to block the afternoon sun coming in. Currently, when we garden down there, we garden every Saturday morning between 8:30 and 10:30. And in the summer, we get visitors down here because there's more light in there. So they'll come down while we're gardening. At the moment, no one's coming down until after we leave, because I go back down after we've gardened just to check on things, and then the visitors turn up. So with the 15-metre height restriction, that's where all the afternoon sun goes down in that southwest area. That's the afternoon sun gone.
Okay. The other thought that occurred to me is that the stream there is fairly close to the boundary in a lot of places, so it doesn't leave a lot of development room in terms of building towards the boundary.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
we're already, I do the riparian planting along the bridge at Twiglands, when you said stand on the bridge, and been doing that riparian planting. It's been a real struggle because it keeps eroding, and it's undermining. You can see the grasses and the cabbage trees are right on the edge, and I think there's probably a 2 metre under the streams under there, because this year about 3 metre length of it dropped into the stream going along the stream that way. So it had already been undermined. I'm sort of hoping the cabbage trees and the grasses will stay there and hold, so when it falls down, but it is gradually coming further and further back. This is a combination of climate change and the development upstream in Granada. There's a lot more sediment coming down in the stream. Also, it's the impact of the stream being moved at Monterey. There's a whole lot of things that impact the stream, not just one thing.
Thank you. Questions from the panel?
I don't have any questions. Thank you. Your submission's very clear. I was just going to confirm that it's just the mixed use area that's 15 metres that is of concern to you. The other areas of residential and industrial along the other boundaries are no concern to you?
No, the sun doesn't affect us from that side. Visually it's impeding, but the sun doesn't come from the southwest. Yeah, the other one was southeast. Yeah, I get them muddled up, sorry. Yeah, for south.
Yes.
East.
One at 1
Yeah,
through
yeah,
south
so
and the other
it's
southwest.
okay, it's a bit okay there. Also, the other site is an really quite an important sort of industrial store warehouse.
Yeah.
It's a pain because there's lots of trucks that go through there daily servicing it, but I think that's actually really important storage. I don't think that would ever become multi-storey buildings there because it's such an important building, and I'm aware that there is another potential use that's not dwellings that council are looking at potentially for that as well.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. That's very clear.
Mr. Beach, just one for me. You have been saying that you would, as a relief, you are asking for 45 degrees recession planes. Now the 60 degrees apply to heritage areas and heritage buildings and obviously heritage reserves. Are you asking for all of these 60 degrees to be reduced to 45 or just for the reserves?
The way I interpreted it is that it's 60 for open space. So I don't know if all historic reserves and council are open space. I don't think they are. This one is. Like government buildings, I don't believe that's open space, and I don't think Alexander Turnbull House is open space. I don't know. I think the iwi ones might be adjacent to open space. So I'm asking for it just for historic reserves, not for
For the
open
building.
space. Yeah. So it would affect less places. If for areas that are already built up, like Alexander Turnbull House is right next to a multi-storey building on its south side, that's already there, whereas in our case it's not already there. So let's protect what is there before it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks very much.
thank you.
Just clarification. So the whole of that block of land that goes right up to the Granada interchange is historic reserve, is it?
No, it's just the green bit,
Just
that little green
right, okay.
piece. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions myself. Oh, Commissioner Dash does.
Oh, yeah, it's just one question of clarification. The photographs you showed of the flooding back in 2001, just so I can get my geography right, and being relatively familiar with the area, is that further up towards the Westchester Drive roundabout? Is it those? So there's a row of residential properties which back onto the stream, and I noticed the one with the bridge in the house, but they're much further up towards
Downstream.
downstream of the halfway house.
This one here.
Yeah, that one there.
That's so the whole road is I looked it up today. It's 5 kilometres long from Johnsonville to Johnsonville to Tawa, and we're right halfway smack in the middle, pretty much. And those houses are just downstream, so that's further down. That's near Takapū railway station. This here is quite close. I'll show you where it is on this map, because we've got that map. I think we've got one back here that shows you where they are here. So that that property is, see that little that black line that goes vertically across. There's an alleyway that no one can use because it goes through the middle of the stream. So that house is just to the north, a couple of blocks to the north of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Any further questions? Well, thank you very much for your presentation and for being flexible. That's been very, very helpful for us.
It's breaking, and I don't mean to say that in a horrible way, but it's the first time I've done this. So.
Yeah, I can understand that. No, fully understand. You did a great job. So thank you for that. And with that, we've got a bit of a break unless we've got luck with technology. No, technology has failed us on that side of things. But we have got her written statement, so we will take that on board.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. The hearing will be adjourned till 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Once again.
Oops, can you just hold on a second, thanks. Go start at 11 o'clock precisely.
Oh, sorry. My watch is ahead of schedule, obviously.
It's like a rugby game. You stand up and say 10, 9, 8.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the hearing on submissions on the centre provisions of the district plan. The hearing has been reconvened, and our next submitter, Johnsonville Community Association. So welcome, Mr. Taylor. And who else do you have with you?
Mary Therese.
Right.
So good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Sorry, Mr. Taylor. The written statement is very comprehensive.
Yes.
And there's no way we could go through that in 20 minutes. So are you designed or going to focus on the key points?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Okay, over to you. Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine, no problem. A copy of our presentation will be provided to Jazz at the end. I just want to start off, first of all, with what we said in our submission about the fire emergency. New Zealand supports a 25-metre maximum building height. We made an error when we assumed that FENZ would only support up to a maximum building height, and that had a consequential effect on a number of recommendations, which in this presentation, which I'll give to Jazz at the end, we've struck through. So you will have a record of the recommendations that we're deleting. So I don't propose to go through those recommendations. We apologise for that error. I'll also, I'll just say that we're not going to repeat during this presentation any of the recommendations that are set out in the Strength 4. We're just going to pick up the key points. We want to start off with an overview, and that is Johnsonville's prioritised for significant population growth, despite Johnsonville for a long time now having a stagnating, rundown, low amenity centre. Now that population growth is going to be enabled by 5 key things that need to happen. The first is the upgrade of the Johnsonville itself from a town centre in the operative district plan to a fully thriving metropolitan centre, which there are many conditions that need to be met for that to achieve. First amongst those, the transport of a significant part of this population growth by the Johnsonville rail line that is said by the council to be a rapid transit service, despite extensive reports, analysis, and indeed confirmation from Wakatataui to the Commission of Stream 1, the Johnsonville rail line is not a rapid transit service. The upgrade to that line will be a very large upgrade needed. And that very large capital expenditure project, which is currently in the Regional Land Transport Plan, is currently located in the 30th year of that plan. That will have to be moved forward to the first 5 years of that plan. So that's the second point. The third point is that, and we made this point in Stream 2, but we want to re-emphasise it, all Johnsonville infrastructure shortfalls, three waters, etc., need to be fully rectified and in place before population growth occurs. And there is a lot of work to be done between the council and Stride to rebuild the centre of Johnsonville. And that work is still in a state of lapse. Finally, there is a need to put in, after all those preceding 4 items, the provision of high density residential accommodation, which currently does not exist in either the high density residential zone or the metropolitan centre zone. The above enablement requires fully integrated urban planning to take place. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. The NPSUD requires metropolitan centres to be well-functioning urban environments. This requires urban planning excellence. This is a theme that we're going to mention repeatedly through this presentation, and therefore fully integrated urban planning to occur. I want to start off now with the Metropolitan Centre overview. Key thing there is the council management have currently refused to fund and resource Johnsonville as a metropolitan centre. And they've also failed to agree to an update of the Johnsonville 2008 Town Centre Plan. This position on the part of the council is completely at odds with their position that Johnsonville is a metropolitan centre. Therefore, it is completely illogical. It completely ignores the fact that the urban planning environment in 2023 is substantially different to the urban planning environment in 2008. We note that Tawa and Oharia have their own fully funded and resourced community boards, despite the fact that they are actually lower down the centre's hierarchy that the council has planned for the city. We see this as vital because if we had a fully funded and resourced metropolitan centre for Johnsonville, this would enable it to represent its best interests for Johnsonville going forward as we deal with the massive change that's going to take place in front of Johnsonville. Updating the Johnsonville 2008 Town Centre Plan either immediately or by 30th of June 2024 at the latest is vital. There is currently no Johnsonville Metropolitan Centre Plan, which is an incredulous situation. The final comment we'd like to make in this section is that the planning rules need to have flexibility in the metropolitan centres, and that the planning rules should permit but not require residential development in the metropolitan centre zone. The primary purpose of the Johnsonville Centre, we think there's a big issue here about what is actually the key purpose of Johnsonville going forward. When we read the council's reports, there's a massive focus on residential activities, but a true metropolitan centre is much wider than that, and has commercial, civic and government services, employment offers, community recreational and entertainment activities. And the strong presence of Kaikoura in the submissions just simply reinforces our impression about that. If the centre of Johnsonville becomes primarily a residential zone, is Johnsonville then still a metropolitan centre zone? Effect of the city outcomes contribution in the Johnsonville metropolitan zone. The JCA continues to object to the proposed city outcomes contribution as a tool to promote better developments. This is based on three issues. Firstly, it's a terrible principle to have a council favouring developments using a reward of permitting developments above the zone's maximum height limits. This means it's neighbouring properties that are to pay the price in terms of the city outcomes contribution. They lose in terms of losing sunlight, privacy and land value. So that's the first point. Secondly, just complying with the design guide permits developments to build 25% above their agreed maximum heights. This means that all maximum height limits in the high density residential zone and centre zones are already 25% higher than that claimed in the rest of the PDP. So 6 stories becomes 7 stories, 8 stories becomes 10 stories. This actually makes a mockery of the maximum height limits in the zone. Lastly, the contribution elements under which the developments can get favourable treatment do not contribute to local community amenity, or in some cases the city. In our view, only elements that contribute to the amenity of the community should be considered for the city outcomes contributions. Right. I would just like to make one final point there, in addition to those, that there is a contest there. No, there's not actually a contest. The city outcomes contribution is an issue of allowing micro design excellence for a building to prevail over macro urban planning best outcomes for the surrounding environment. That's a key trade-off. The JCA requests that the city outcomes rules be removed from all its zones except the city centre zone, on the basis that it imposes an unreasonable impact on neighbouring properties, their amenity values in the name of wider community benefits. If the council wants to reward developments, it should do so by other means. We also particularly note that the application of the city outcomes contribution to the high density residential zone is particularly grievous, given no evidence has been offered by council officers on it being applied to a residential zone. In stream 2, there was a whole lot of submissions against, I'll just call it C, and there's been no council evidence in reply to those submissions, none whatsoever. This is completely wrong, and in our view, it represents process failure on the part of the council. We've said here, somewhat reluctantly, but we'll say it, if commissioners insist on rewarding C with overheight buildings being included, the JCA requests that overheight is not permitted simply from complying with the design guide, and that C height increases are limited to 50%. Maximum height that needs for Johnsonville Metropolitan Zone. We've actually put quite a lot of evidence here. Stride has owned the Johnsonville Mall since 2008. When the council consulted on the draft district plan in 2021-22, council increased the maximum height for the Johnsonville Mall from 2 stories to 8 stories. Noting that with the city outcomes contribution, this is really 10 stories. It is pertinent for the Commission to note this increase in the maximum height to 8 stories was also to include provision for population growth in Johnsonville. Since then, the council has proposed increasing the maximum height limit to 10 stories for the Johnsonville Metropolitan Zone, noting with C, this is really permitting 12 stories. This benefit directly contributes to the value of the Stride property, and that is explained in paragraph 58 of Tim Helm's report on behalf of the Newtown Residents Association for Stream 4, where he states, right, zoning changes are capitalised into land values, higher land values. Land values do not receive a financial benefit from restrictive zoning, rather additional land use rights provide option value to develop, causing houses to appreciate in value. The more development ready the land, the higher the uplift windfall gain from the upzoning, as was observed in Auckland following the 2016 upzoning. The council is now faced with a request from Stride to increase the maximum height for the Johnsonville Mall from 8 stories to 50 metres. I've got to say that in terms of that issue, the council put up a height limit for the centre of Johnsonville of 35 metres, but then said that you can put the C on top of that up to 50%, which means that the 35 metres goes to 52.5 metres, and Stride comes in with a submission allowing requesting 50 metres. The council has actually snookered itself for that position. The other thing that's happening here is that the council is giving all these height benefits to Stride, but it's not actually getting anything in return. They've given 3 resource consents in the past, and none of them have been acted upon, as Lisa Hayes says in her paragraph 68 report. We haven't got it right there. We need to have a minimum height, as we're saying, as I'm now just going to say. The JCA opposes the council's maximum height increase to 10 stories with the city outcomes contribution. Johnsonville should either have 8 stories with city outcomes contribution to 25%, so that would take it to 10, or 10 stories without city outcomes contribution. The JCA opposes the stride submission for a maximum height increase to 15 metres, that's around 15 stories. If Stride has a compelling case for an overheight development, then they can do this through a publicly notified resource consent. The other issue that we just want to mention there is about the Metropolitan Centre Plan for Johnsonville, which is linked in with the heights issue. We're firmly of the view that the Metropolitan Centre Plan for Johnsonville should not be solely decided by either Stride alone or Stride with the council. It's fundamental the community are involved. I'll move away from that issue now, but I want to move to the changing of the high density residential zone maximum height after public consultation. Now, this was where the council had repeatedly gone out to the public and said that it would be up to 6 stories high with a maximum of 21 metres. What is really annoying to us is that the city outcomes contribution now applies to the high density residential zones and other lower zones. And there's been no consultation, or there's been no response to the submissions, as we set out in, as I've said earlier, in terms of Stream 2. The JCA strongly reiterates its request to return to the maximum height for the high density residential zones to be up to 21 metres or 6 stories in the interest of fairness and natural justice. The process failure in Stream 2 from the council in terms of not replying is a breach of and not replying to submitters' representations about the city outcomes contribution affecting the heights in the high density residential zones is a breach of natural justice. It should not be accepted by this commission. I'll move on to planning rules. I'll try and skip through these other issues as quickly as I can. Planning rules for Johnsonville. I guess the key thing we'd say there is that the comments we've made about the maximum heights and the city outcomes contribution emphasises to us, and we say to the Commission, the absolute importance of ensuring greater and astute control over height rules in the planning rules for Johnsonville. I think in the interest of, I was going to say some things about maximising sunlight view shafts. I think the key thing, the key thing that we want to say here is that the JCA is very committed to the importance of sunlight being maximised as urban planning changes occur in Johnsonville. We made a point in Stream 2, and I want to emphasise it again in this stream, that we think that in going forward in this high density environment, what we want to see is the maximisation of sunlight, the minimisation of shading, astutely set recession planes, and the astute usage of step setbacks between zones and possibly within zones. And we believe that if that is followed as an integrated set, that will help to mitigate a lot of the adverse effects of high density developments on neighbouring properties that are much lower down and may miss out on sunlight and be affected by wind effects and so forth. I'll move on now to wind. The JCA submission for Stream 4 makes it clear that wind is an issue that needs careful evaluation to ensure that wind tunnel effects are evaluated correctly and mitigated successfully in both the high density residential zone and the metropolitan centre zone. And we particularly noted the evidence of Nick Locke, where he states in paragraph 17 to 19 of his report to the Commission that where there is a mixture of tall buildings with smaller buildings, the wind tunnel effects are escalated. Going forward, Johnsonville will have this building configuration in its high density residential zone, where nearly all of the smaller buildings are made of wood. In a fire situation on a windy day, this could be catastrophic. This reinforces the absolute importance of ensuring there is easy access and strong water pressure for fire emergency services in the high density residential zone. And I'll just add to that in our submission, we included an article from Stuff about FEM's considerable difficulties with intensification in Auckland. And I think the commissioners need to think about that very carefully when setting up the rules about in such a way that fire emergency access and water pressure is maintained for the fire emergency services in that situation. Finally, nearly finally, infrastructure shortfalls need to be rectified for intensification. We're particularly heartened by the fact that the Greater Wellington Regional Council have actually emphasised this issue both in Stream 2 and in Stream 4, that they support infrastructure upgrades being completed before high density intensification. We completely support them on this position. And just to make it absolutely clear, Johnsonville is earmarked for the highest level of intensification. The JCA wants to reinforce the absolute importance of infrastructure shortfalls needing to be rectified before intensification for the following areas: public transport infrastructure shortfalls, tree water infrastructure shortfalls, permeability effects assessed and mitigated, and green spaces infrastructure shortfalls, which is actually a big issue in the centre of Johnsonville. In the triangle, there is no blade of grass in there if you exclude the railway, the green embankment next to the railway station. Absolutely no green space there whatsoever.
Mr. Taylor, I'm just aware that we're
Okay.
past 20 minutes, and I'm aware we get other.
Yeah. Do you want me to?
Is it?
I'll just hand this over to Jazz at the end, and that will be fine.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. We'll
There's nothing that you want to ask of us.
Well, no. I was going to turn to the panel to see if there are any questions.
Oh, right.
Yep. Okay.
Just a clarification, really. So you, just in terms of the crossover between, just in terms of the crossover between hearing stream 2, which was residential, and this hearing stream, you're correct. Hearing stream 2 did not address city outcomes, and it has been addressed in the 42 reports for this hearing. So all the submissions that submitted on those provisions have been addressed through these reports. Is that your understanding, or
No, because no. We went through. I did not see any reply to our recommendations in terms of city outcomes
for Johnsonville community?
I will take an action to check that, but
I haven't done a search on your particular you know, Johnsonville in particular, but just in general, there's you know, this is where it's been addressed. So it's in the overview section 42 report.
I did read that, but I think what we would be looking for is response to our particular recommendations. But I will check that, and if I'm wrong, I'll withdraw that comment.
You could quite possibly be right. As I say, I haven't done a word search on your particular submission, so you may be right. But I understand that what you're saying is that you feel that perhaps the submissions in hearing stream 2 that was specific to the city outcomes that weren't addressed then, which were deferred to now, may not have been captured. That's your concern?
Yeah, that is the concern, very much so, yes.
So we've got that on record now, so the council will be able to respond to that.
Right.
Yeah. I'll leave it there for my questions. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones, just to understand your relief. We're talking, just so you understand, just so I can understand your relief, what you actually want for the metropolitan centre zone. In terms of height, the proposed plan has a 35-metre height limit, and you've referenced Stride making a submission to go to 50. Your preference is for 25, is that right?
Our preference is for 8 stories, ideally 8 stories only, or 8 stories plus city outcomes contribution up to 10.
Yeah.
Or 10 stories, that's it.
Okay. So,
And can I just say that there is an argument in the Stride submission that it's uneconomic unless it's 15 stories. Well, you just have to look around the city. Christchurch, there's plenty of larger buildings that have been built much lower than that height. So we don't accept that view.
okay.
That we need to go up to 15 stories in the centre of Johnsonville.
Okay, that's understood. And
Yep.
the second quick question of clarification, you mentioned that Johnsonville isn't really ready infrastructure-wise for significant uplift, not only in the residential zones, but particularly in relation to the metropolitan centre zone. The infrastructure deficits you've identified are in relation to public transport, water supply, wastewater, flood hazards and so forth. What about the traffic environment in the Johnsonville Triangle itself? Did you have any particular comment about what
Yes.
that future might look like?
Yes.
In terms of,
We've made it clear in Stream 1 that we support rapid transit service from Johnsonville.
yeah.
Absolutely, public transport service. What is clear is that there is a significant car parking shortage in Johnsonville. What we find currently is that the car usage in Johnsonville is that people end up parking on the peripheral streets around the Johnsonville Triangle. So we've made it clear we've done a strategic plan and a long-term plan for Johnsonville, and in our long-term plan, which was sent to the council, we've said that it's imperative that there is either car parking buildings or car parking floors in buildings. Further than that, sorry, no,
No, I've got a point.
and can I just?
I
just wanted to talk about traffic.
Yeah, okay.
I wanted to talk also about traffic because we also, we've signalled this in our long-term plan to the WELLington City Council. We think it's really important that we have an integrated public transport hub, the buses next to the train station, and we also have signalised crossings, improvements around Moorfield Road, which is actually quite dangerous for pedestrians, and there've been accidents there, and Broderick Road. And we want phasing of the traffic lights to be improved. We've just actually spoken with MetLink at our last JCA meeting about that very issue, to improve the phasing of the traffic lights.
I'd just like
Oh,
to
yeah,
add,
sure.
I think certain times of the day there's already significant traffic congestion issues around Johnsonville. The main road is a significant through road for a lot of people. You find queues coming off the motorway all around that triangle. There's already a lot of traffic congestion, it does need a really good traffic management plan for the entire area, especially if there's more population growth, because certain times of the day is already very congested, especially on the main road and the areas around the triangle like Broderick Road, Frankmore Avenue and Moorfield Road.
Okay, thank you.
Just one question from me. Residential, your association's position, shall we say, on residential. So as far as I understand it, there's no compulsion to have residential development in the city centre. It's provided for, but it's not necessary, it's not compulsory to have it. What's the position what is the opposition to having, if it were to be made mandatory, what's the opposition to having
Well,
residential in there?
I'm conscious that Stride have actually put in their submission that there is a requirement, I might not be using quite the right word, that on the ground floor there of premises that they may be such that they can be used for residential purposes when they're more likely to be used for commercial purposes. We're not opposed to having residential development in the centre, and we've made that clear in our JCA submission last year in September 2022 to the council when we're submitting on the draft district plan. But we want to make certain the balance is right so that we actually get a fully functioning metropolitan centre, not just a centre that is simply devoted to residential activity.
Okay, so the association's concerned that it might be weighed towards residential to the cost of having other uses.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
I understand. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. Any further questions?
Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
With WELLington. Just putting your statement in front of us. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jane O'Donovan from Live Wellington. Nice to be here once again. So just speaking the issues that we want to cover in this submission, you've got our written statement already, but just going over 4 main areas: the heights in the central city, the city outcomes contributions, the boundary of the central city zone and zoning of Adelaide Road. So just starting off with the heights in the central city. As you know, there's a proposal now in the Section 42 report that the heights in the central city zone should be unlimited, which is different to what was in the proposed district plan. So we oppose that change. We agree with the points made by the urban planner Stuart Niven, who actually is here today, in his statement of evidence for Wellington's Character Charitable Trust, that this sends the wrong signal. It sends a signal that Wellington doesn't care about its urban form. Instead, we believe we should send the signal that we welcome development as long as it makes a contribution to the cityscape and the public realm, is thoughtfully designed and respectful of its environs. There's a general assumption that for a city to achieve density, very tall buildings must be built. But Jeff Speck, the new urbanist from America, points out in his book Walkable City that much density can be achieved at lower heights. He says a 10-storey city like Washington simply does not need towers to achieve great walking density. Indeed, outside of Midtown and the financial district, most of Manhattan's lively avenues are lined by buildings closer to 10 stories tall. And indeed, many of the cities, this is me speaking now, many of the cities held up as great examples of density, for example, Paris and Copenhagen don't feature very tall buildings outside of its central city, if at all. An additional point, we believe, is the value of providing certainty to developers. If it's not known how high future buildings located around the sites that they're developing may go, developers may be wary of investing because, of course, potential purchasers, particularly with apartments, want to know if their view is going to be there forever, and they are wary of being built out. And we've seen this already in Te Aro, where there's a phenomenon of mostly corner sites being developed where that risk is lessened. So we believe if we want development to occur and people to have the confidence in that development, stated height limits are preferred. So in summary, we oppose the replacement of the height limits with the height thresholds, and we request that the height limits in the notified proposed district plan for the central city are retained. Just moving on to the city outcomes contribution, and the previous speaker talked about this as well. On the face of it, there's some good points being made, and of course we would support the idea that we want buildings to have high performance, that there's contributions to the public space, that buildings are earthquake resilient, and there's assisted housing and access for all mobilities. But we don't believe that those should be things that are traded off in return for urban design outcomes. And I just noted a certain irony that the Section 42 report claims that these contributions are about density done well, but it wouldn't be the way that we would understand density done well. The 4 categories of outcomes are not related to the visible design of the building or how it impacts on its surroundings, which is, I believe, a point the previous speaker also made. So providing public space may not compensate for a building that's ugly or impacts amenity, and accessibility, sustainability and affordability do nothing for the streetscape. In other words, a building could tick all these boxes and still wreck the streetscape, create wind tunnels and shade public spaces. So that's not density done well, and we don't believe these elements should be horse-traded as a way of achieving an oversized building. And we also note the proposal to remove some of the triggers for the contribution to kick in, which seems also detrimental. So, one of the things we do, we do want design elements to be part of the assessment for oversized or undersized buildings, and we also think the enforcement of a design panel would be a good step and should be triggered by overheight, underheight, large scale and non-residential developments as those conditions previously in the proposed district plan. So we also, I think I've said most of those things. So just just emphasising that the urban design panel is a very good idea, and we would like that to be included in possible, where possible. However, we do oppose the city outcomes contributions, and we would seek to have those removed as a way of achieving overheight or underheight buildings. In terms of the boundaries for the central city zone, in Wellington, I think we're lucky that we have suburbs that are relatively distinct and they have their own life and character. And as Live Wellington, we believe there's a lot of value in reinforcing these distinctions as a way of promoting that sense of place that helps support livability and community spirit. But there is a risk that the proposed district plan is eroding this with the spread of the central city zone encroaching onto neighbouring suburbs and muddying the boundaries of what we previously would have regarded as distinct communities. And given the proposal to offer unlimited heights in the central city zone, the boundaries of that zone become of even greater interest and concern. And some of the areas now captured by the central city zone, we would say, are not suitable for unlimited heights. Just referring to the purpose stated in the proposed district plan for the central city zone, it says it is to enable and reinforce the continued primacy of the Wellington central city area as the principal commercial and employment centre servicing the city and metropolitan region. The city centre zone is the commercial heart of Wellington and the wider region and New Zealand's capital city. It's a major employment hub for the region and contains a vibrant and diverse mix of inner city living, entertainment, educational, government and commercial activity. Relative to the other areas of the city, it exhibits a heightened intensity and scale of development. So I think most Wellingtonians would recognise that description as applying to the areas around Lambton Quay, Lower Willis Street, Courtney Place, Te Aro, but not Mount Victoria, Ara Valley, Mount Cook and Adelaide Road. So most cities have a central business district that is clearly defined, and so it should remain for Wellington. So we argue that Adelaide Road, Mount Victoria and Ara Valley should not be part of the central city zone. They can be further intensified, but not in that manner. And I just think it's worth saying a little bit more about Adelaide Road in particular. It's been the subject of a lot of discussion, and it's an area that's been long recognised as being ripe for development. And indeed, in 2008, the council worked with the local community on a blueprint of how the area might look in 20 years, which I provided to you as part of the submission. And it's an excellent framework, obviously the fruit of consultation with the community, and set out an ambitious and attractive plan to accommodate more people with higher density mixed-use development. And I think it's worth just recapping what that 2008 document had to say. The Adelaide Road corridor is a relatively narrow area that fronts Adelaide Road from the John Street intersection to the Basin Reserve. Its proximity to public transport, the CBD, and major employers and businesses supports an active live-work area, i.e. a mix of commercial and business uses in residential housing and apartments. Building heights would be higher in this area to achieve this activity mix, up to a maximum of 24 metres, providing a minimum of 2 levels of employment activity are provided at lower levels. However, building design will need to be of a high quality. To encourage a more people-friendly, attractive and vibrant environment, street frontages at ground level are occupied by active users rather than residential uses. To support the increased employment and residential intensity of this area, improvements to the Adelaide Road corridor, including pedestrian safety, street trees, landscaping and public space improvements are proposed. Significant heritage buildings will be retained and enhanced to contribute to the vibrancy and sense of place of this area. So a great vision, but unfortunately 20 years on nearly, and very little of that has been realised. But the potential obviously still remains, and the ideas and the vision put forward in that 2008 document are still valid. And I believe it's particularly pertinent to the zoning and height of Adelaide Road. The 2008 framework envisaged heights of up to 18 metres being permitted and 24 metres discretionary along the main thoroughfare, with lower heights of 12 and 18 metres elsewhere. So at the moment, the current proposed district plan with Adelaide Road in the centre city zone, with a height control area number 10, would permit buildings of up to 42 metres, which is pretty much double what was originally proposed back in 2008. So we don't believe that Adelaide Road is suitable as a central city zone. As the 2008 framework explains, Adelaide Road is an urban community on the edge of the CBD, and this still holds true, we believe. It's on the edge, but not part of the CBD. So our submission is that Adelaide Road should not be part of the central city zone. It should be regarded as a mixed-use zone instead. And this was suggested, considered in the section 42 discussion. And the author of that 42 report, the person had rejected the idea of Adelaide Road being zoned HRZ, and saying if it was not central city zone, it would be retained as centre zoning or mixed use zone rather than the HRZ. So I think that while they say the HRZ is not appropriate, they don't go on to say why they MUZ, the mixed use zone, isn't appropriate, despite noting that area has been identified for mixed use high intensity growth for some time. So we believe that a solution would be an additional height control being added to the MUZ zone, allowing for a maximum height of 24 metres. And this would be in line with that 2008 plan, allowing for significant density, but still drawing a distinction between Adelaide Road and the central city. So in summary, we oppose the zoning of Adelaide Road as central city zone, and we request that it should be a mixed use zone instead. And those are the points.
Thank you very much. Are you available for questions? Questions? Questions from the panel?
Just on the last point in terms of Adelaide Road, you're right, and then we have had a bit of discussion from a number of submitters about Adelaide Road. So just so I'm clear, you really feel that the central city actually begins at the Basin Reserve, and but the nature and character of the properties on Adelaide Road is it's a bit of a mixed thing at the moment, and your preference is for MUZ with a 24-metre height limit. The contrary view from the officers is that it does perform very many central city functions, and people, sort of equate it as soon as you hit John Street, you're actually moved from Newtown into a more central area or central city environment. Do you have any comment on that last point?
Well, I think the central city starts to peter out when you get beyond Courtney Place, really. You've got Te Aro, which has got some high buildings, but with that gap of Pukeahu and the Basin Reserve, there's sort of a natural boundary there that really seems to ring the central city. The points about Mount Victoria, the other natural boundary is the Cambridge-Kent Terrace line as well, and then Willis Street obviously on the other side. So it seems to be quite naturally that is where the central city is, and it feels like there's a bit of a risk in trying to stretch the central city out. Part of the joy of the central city is you've got a lot of density and vibrancy altogether, and if you give the opportunity for that to sort of sprawl, you don't get the same benefits of a central city. I think there's a potential for Adelaide Road to have its own character, and I've seen in other areas where there's been industrial areas that have been kind of rejuvenated, they have a certain different category, character about them, where warehouses get, turned into residential, and you have it's a sort of a mix of uses. You might have a few high-rise buildings, but there's real some manufacturing, some commercial, and it's just a different feeling from what you get of the central city, which is much more sort of retail, commercial, and high rises. So I just, in terms of creating that different feeling, and it's certainly looking at the 2008 document, it was much more about greenery and sort of more of a lifestyle feel than I think you'd get in the central city.
Okay, I certainly can recall a newspaper article probably 15, 20 years ago that categorised New Zealand's 10 ugliest streets, and I seem to recall that stretch of Adelaide Road from John Street through to the Basin was one of those. But it's a matter of progress as well. But thank you for your commentary on that.
It's a shame because it has got so much potential. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Here, except just one quick question. You sort of commented that certain places weren't suitable for unlimited height. What's the converse of that? Are there parts of the city do you think could absorb unlimited height, whatever that means?
Well, I guess we don't really support the idea of unlimited heights throughout the central city at all. I think it's better to have the certainty of height limits, both for developers and for potential residents. But of course, those height limits, as long as they're stated, can be higher. And of course, we see that around Lambton Quay and the terrace and parts of Willis Street as well. I think the point is really knowing what the heights are provides a lot more certainty to everyone.
Thank you. I have no more questions. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, our final submitted for today is the Onslow Residents Community Association. We'd like to come on up. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
We've got 3 people who sit at one table. Yep, all right.
Yep, Mr. Nevins, more than welcome.
This way.
That's great. Thank you. Well, we, as you've heard, we have read your pre-circulated statement to the board, so thank you for that. And we've also read Mr. Nevins. But basically, we've got until 12:40, so the floor is yours in terms of how you'd like to present and talk to your submission.
We requested an hour, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, or can I have an hour too?
Yeah.
We're happy to eat in garage.
Good morning, Tenneco. My name's Lawrence Collingbourne. I'm just going to introduce our team. This is actually a joint presentation between the Onslow Residents Community Association and Julie Ward, who's sitting on my left, who happens to be one of our residents, and Stuart Niven is presenting expert evidence on our behalf. Our intent is only to speak for half of the allotted time, so we'll see how we go about that. Basically, in this session, we are submitting that Kandala should be a neighbourhood centre and not a local centre, and that it should be surrounded by a residential zone of 11 metres, not 14 metres, and that both of these need robust design rules and guidance measures to ensure great outcomes. So I'm going to invite Stuart to give his expert evidence first, and then Julie will evaluate Kandala Village as a centre for us, and then I will finish by summarising the key points behind our request. Thank you very much for your time.
Morning. I'm assuming that you've read evidence, so I'm going to really just summarise it for you, and that evidence is in two parts. My comments to do with the city outcomes contribution technique, and secondly about Kandala Centre itself and the criteria that determine whether it's a neighbourhood or a local centre. So beginning with the city outcomes contribution, I was expecting to be interrogated on that more fully tomorrow to do with the charitable trust, WELLington charitable trust submission, but I'm perfectly happy to cover those things today. I think it's true to say that I'm not a fan of this particular mechanism, and I'm not a fan of it for a number of quite clear reasons. The first reason is that it's partial and arbitrary. In other words, it identifies and has a lot to say in the plan, including the 42A report, about the importance of these public goods that it identifies and awards points to for the city as a whole. In other words, there's a strong representation of those qualities as being important qualities for the city that match their objectives, long-term objectives for the city, and one would expect an even-handed and strategic thinking about the application of that to the central city, and would actually to all the centres where it applies. But that's not the case. It is entirely determined by the indeterminate nature of development. So it only comes into play when there's a development that reaches the threshold height. And nobody can say at this stage what that pattern will be or how frequently it'll happen. So there are some very big drawbacks to what appear to be a keynote measure in the plan. My feeling is that the arbitrariness of it and the partial delivery of it is so poor that I really can't find the argument for why this mechanism has been introduced, to be perfectly honest. I also look back at the rather checkered history of these sorts of mechanisms because they've been around since the 60s, and I make reference to that in my evidence. My personal experience of it was the one that was introduced into WELLington in the late 80s and early 90s. I spoke against it at the time because it seemed to me that we weren't prepared to record what we got for the transaction. And I have to say today, I'm hard placed to find evidence of what we got. And yet what I do know is there is all that space that we bonused, which is earning money every day that we speak and has done ever since it's been there. So there isn't an even-handedness about mechanisms like this. There's not an even-handedness about the delivery and the transaction. The idea that public goods are important for the city and important to obtain, that we should then make them a matter of a bartering process rather than finding some means to insist on it. Now, I've read the commentary that's been prepared by the officers to do with my evidence, and I refer to Dr. Zanani's comments, and also to Lisa Hayes, I think, as well, both saying that it's all very well for me to say that this should be demanded, but in fact, within the Resource Management Act, that's not possible to make these mandatory. My comment to that is that the city government touches the city in so many ways. There are so many techniques beyond the planning system for advocating strongly and for influencing those sorts of outcomes. I don't believe they've been explored. There's been I know that the origin of this mechanism was the embarrassment about the design excellence component of the existing plan, which I've had to work with, and frankly, is you could drive several buses through because there's no definition, and it's entirely relies on the personal judgment of the person doing the assessment, which is a very poor basis to make a policy that's important like that to have any kind of legs. So I know it's not a one-to-one replacement, but if you look at the criteria that's been listed as the public goods, they are important qualities of Butter City, and the plan has a lot to say about those important qualities, relates it to the specific objectives of the City Council for the future of the city, all those things, which you'd expect it to relate to a mechanism that was at least comprehensive in the way it was actually applied, and that is not the case. So it's my strong belief that this mechanism is flawed and it should be removed from the plan. So that's my first point. Second point is the taxonomy, if you like, of the different centres and how they're defined. Now, my reading of the plan is that the emphasis for the distinctions between the different centres is, first of all, the range of services and facilities that they embody, and secondly, the catchment that relates to those services and facilities. So the wider the catchment, the more important the centre, with neighbourhood being at the local catchment end of the spectrum. So if I can just hold that point for a minute. The second thing is the issue of density. There's a kind of a bias in this plan. I'm not unfamiliar with that bias. It happens a lot. The density can only be interpreted by height. There's no doubt about it. A high building will produce density, but it's not the only means by which density can be produced. And I make reference to both Paris and Barcelona, two intensely dense cities, which largely draw from their density and 5 to 6 story scale. It's a question of design and skill of planning to do with design. And once again, there's nothing in this plan that draws attention and places emphasis on that quality of delivering density. So, for example, the determined height, or recommended height, a height limit for buildings within the local centre is 22 metres, which is effectively 6 to 7 stories. And the recommendation of the council officer was that this be reduced to 18 metres for Kandala. My observation there is why, because the other important quality about defining one centre from another has to be its sense of place and its physical characteristics and the way it's perceived and understood and valued by the people that are resident or users of it. There's rhetoric within the plan about the importance of sense of place and local character, but there's precious little analysis of what that actually constitutes for the various centres. In other words, the emphasis on the services, I said, and the catchment. So for the statement to that 18 metres would be more appropriate, there's almost no evidence provided or no material provided to support that in any kind of sense of place or local form and character terms, which makes it very difficult to understand why it was dropped to 18 metres. My own feeling is that, and I'm quite familiar with Kandala Centre, as I worked for Earthfield Architects for a number of years, and that was where we went to get lunch regularly, and it hasn't changed a hell of a lot in that time. It's got a scale which, yes, has got a little bit of concentration, but it's largely a dispersed centre. You know, if you walk around it, it covers a wider area than the other centres we're talking about, and the scale is low. It's about 1 to 2 stories. My view was that a 6-story scale introduced into that context would be a difficult one, whereas a 4-story scale with the emphasis on the skill of achieving density within the 4-story scale would be a much more appropriate way of introducing the necessary component of density to Kandala. And I still very strongly believe that. And that's pretty much the sum of what I had to say to do with this particular submission.
Ms. Ward, do you want to?
Yes.
I
yeah.
think we'll hear from all of you. and
Okay,
then we'll
right.
have questions.
So I might be a little bit still because I'll try and not say what Stuart's already said. No, that's all right. I probably just like to step back to one thing that Johnsonville said, which we've also found, is that the overlap between stream 2 and stream 4 has been a little bit problematic for us because there's a 14-metre circle that's proposed to be around the outside of Canala Village, which strictly speaking fits into the residential section. But the reason that the 14 metres is there is because of the definition of the centre. So we kind of felt as though they were inextricably related and that we were going to deal with them in the stream. So sorry if we're talking about a little bit in the wrong place. So basically, so far as the neighbourhood centre thing, I submit, I like the legal submissions that Duncan Ballinger made for WELLington's Character Charitable Trust. That Canala services the immediate neighbourhood, and in my paper I've provided you with the map from the Business Improvement District, which shows that really it's only the immediate Canala people who are shopping in the centre. Even Broadmeadows people are heading towards Johnsonville, and anybody more or less halfway through Nio is heading towards Crofton Downs. We're one of the smaller centres and we haven't got any services that are not replicated in either Nio, Crofton Downs or Johnsonville. And it seems, as Mr. Ballinger has pointed out, unclear why there's a distinction between Canala and Nio. Nio's got a petrol station, which Canala doesn't have. Canala has a small, relative to other areas, supermarket, which Nio doesn't have, but otherwise we're pretty much of a muchness. We've all got a basic amount of services, but we don't have a whole variety of services. You know, we've got one of each thing, really, not a great deal of choice. So in terms of densification for Canala, is it going to meet the overall objectives of the district plan? And it's one of the main things is that there seems to be an intention to prevent people from having to travel large distances, and that there's got to be a lot more encouragement on walking, cycling and in using public transport. Now, Lawrence, on behalf of the Residents Association, actually canvassed all of the businesses in Canala Village to ascertain actually how many people are employed, and there's 200 full-time equivalent jobs. So basically, everybody else that lives there is going to have to go somewhere else. And most people, the majority of people, I would say, come to the CBD. It's not walkable. It's over an hour's walk to get to the CBD. So people are not going to do that. We've talked previously about the limitations of the public transport. The public transport is good, but it is constrained, and piling in too many people into Canala is going to put real pressure on the public transport. It seems to me, just anecdotally, that the number of vehicles that are parked at Park and Ride every day means that even the people who take public transport are definitely driving from somewhere to get to public transport in the first place. And similarly, the vehicle congestion around the schools every morning seems to me that also that people are, mostly because of time constraints, actually driving somewhere else on the way to somewhere else. So Canala is a family suburb, so trips are being made in family groups, and people of different ages and abilities are travelling together, but they're all trying to get to different destinations. And that's quite different to a single person who's going from home to work. And there's the services around Canala, they're quite dispersed. So the early childhood centres, the schools, the play areas, the green space, the sporting facilities, the railway stations, a lot of them are nowhere near the centre. So you're having to zigzag back and forth. And so theoretically, you're in a little 10-minute window, but actually you're on a half-hour walk to get all of the places fitted into what you're trying to do. So I sort of think that the walkability is less achievable in reality than it is theoretically. Now, the other point that I'd like to refer to is the height zones, is the inconsistencies of this 14-metre circle, which applies around some centres and not others. And for some reason, it's decided that Kandala deserves one, but Crofton Downs doesn't, nor does Kelburn or Churton Park or Karori. And so I see Kandala as being more analogous to those centres, and also, more suited to just sticking to the medium density around the centre at the 11-metre level rather than the 14-metre level. I feel as though the 14-metre medium density sends a message to people that they're going to get better services if they're close to the shops, when, as I've pointed out, lots of the other services are actually a long way from the shops. The particular one is the green space, that within that 14-metre zoned area, apart from people's private lawns, there's a tiny little playground outside the library, which is about, wouldn't even be 10 metres wide, and apart from that there's no other public green space, unless you count the grass verges outside people's houses. And the final point that I'd probably like to make is that two other points, is that we've got disconnected street networks, that lots of people are actually down driveways, and so creating practical locations for increased density is more difficult. But as Stuart said, we don't need to jump to high rises to add density, because there are lots of other options other than tall buildings that can add to rather than subtract from the strong sense of community that already exists in Kandala. Putting people into tall buildings where they have to look at each other out the windows can be quite isolating, and at the moment we've got a fabulous sense of community, and I'd be really sad if that was destroyed by people being isolated in tall buildings. So there's already considerable potential for standard subdivision. In my street, single houses recently they've built one big house and they're building two houses, so townhouses behind. So one has become three. There's another house in my street where the existing house is going to remain, and there's another house going to be built in front of it. And so that's only in one house of 30 people. We've got 4 more that have happened without noticing any increase in height. And similarly, we're noticing that there's a lot of young people that are actually moving from the centre of town and are sharing the larger houses, so that actually the density is coming back by the fact that a 4-bedroom house is actually full with 4 people instead of only being filled with a couple of empty nesters with 2 spare bedrooms. There's the American model of the accessory dwelling units, which are what we'd probably call granny flats, that again, they can increase density without having to have demolition of existing homes. It's more environmentally sensitive, and it keeps the urban fabric at a human scale, and keeping the scale of the community, I think, is something that I really value. MDRS is already enabling semi-detached or terraced townhouses, and there's 6 townhouses at 40 Acre Crescent, which I guess probably all of you have seen the pictures of. They look like Paddington in Sydney. They're held up in every piece of advertising that the council puts out as being the pinnacle of what good density looks like. More of that can happen without having to have going up to 4 stories or more. And those kinds of developments can preserve access to some garden, a place for kids to play, a place to hang out the washing, which I actually think is a really valuable thing to be able to do. There's tiny housing, there's co-housing. So I just think that there's lots of other options that can be dealt with without us having to go to this height, which will give density, will welcome new neighbours. We can become a bigger community and do our bit to absorb the additional population without having to think that height's the only way to do it.
Thank you.
That's it.
That's good. Colin?
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. First of all, I'd just like to say that we support what the Johnsonville Community Association had to say earlier, and we also support what Martin Jenkins had to say on behalf of his two friends of Kandala. I'm just going to cover 4 major points, if I may, and it's all under the theme of the fact that we want progress and densification. Right? We want it to be good for young people as well as for older people. We just love having kids in our village, for example, and we want it to respect the amenity and character of our suburbs. But most of all, it's got to reflect the realities of our geography and topography. So I've already told you the 3 things we're asking for. Basically, a neighbourhood centre zone, MRZR1 residential around it, and some robust design guides and rules to ensure great outcomes are achieved for both the centre and the residents. So 4 major points. One is a bit of a rehash because we still haven't heard the answer on this one. The transport experts have spoken. The Johnsonville Railway is not a rapid transit system. It is PT4 transport, not PT1 transport. And by the RLTP criteria, that makes it not rapid transit. And there are no plans to change it. Small adjustments to its capacity can be made, but no significant gains can be made within even the $7 billion that the regional council are asking for its 2 main trunk lines. We showed in stream 1 with the help of Dr. Helm that adding high-rise to Kandala would be a mistake. It would overload our infrastructure and transport services, increase the city's carbon emissions and relocate development away from where it could be better supported, while failing to increase the overall development of the city. Dr. Helm also showed that adding high-rise along the Johnsonville line would only add 1,000 new development sites to the 19,000 development sites possible without high-rise. Now, last month, Statistics New Zealand came out with a new forecast of the city's population growth. It is 26,100, not the 59,800 Census partners. And we will ask you to take that into account as you consider the capacity that needs to be developed. We would say if we're offering 19,000 additional sites, we're doing pretty well to meet that extra demand. You don't have to clap though. Major point number 2, we have insufficient scale to be a local centre. So we support Julie Ward's evidence here, and the 5 things I like to draw out from that are that Kandala does not serve a wider catchment, so it doesn't qualify to be a local centre. Only 3 other local centres are smaller than Kandala by both surrounding population and land area. It offers similar commercial and community services to the Nio and Crofton Downs, the Nio neighbourhood centre. Kandala Centre has less than 200 full-time equivalent jobs, and only 1% of the total retail sales in the city are transacted in the Kandala Centre. So major point number 3 for us, so it's insufficient scale. Densification can be done well at 3 stories. What Stuart Niven's expert evidence shows to us is that what we're asking for will enable Kandala to provide a good quality, well-functioning urban environment where quality densification is achieved by good design standards, where developments reflect the amenity and character of our suburb and respect the realities of our geography and topography. We support, the other thing I want to say is we support the achievement of public goods, but they must be achieved independently of the height of development. They must go where they're needed and they must have reliable. Major point number 4 is perhaps the one I want to focus on uniquely from me. The district plan has little discernible consistency between the designation of the centres and their heights, their sizes in terms of land area, and their residential zoning around them, as shown in Julie Ward's evidence table 2. Dr. Helm has made the point that the impact of zoning is to shape where housing is built, not the overall amount that is built, nor the price it will sell at. We assert that the designation of centres heights has a similar property, and therefore it needs to be thought about carefully and used wisely. We are a city of just 210,000 people. We have to prioritise where development happens and where services are focused if we want to create well-functioning centres that support our population distribution and infrastructure constraints. The number of centres providing prime retail, community, industrial, business, recreational and entertainment service has to be limited by the scale of the city. Proliferation of development into many centres will inevitably dilute services at big centres. So we suggest that if we focus services in the city centre and the 2 metropolitan centres achieve what they're supposed to, and we echo Johnson Community Association's request for it to be a metropolitan centre, in reality, the large local centres that the council has identified, and that's at least 4, that's at least 7 centres, right? We can optimise infrastructure services and influence where people choose to live to reduce carbon emissions, improve accessibility and relieve congestion if we focus on those. We're not saying how many it should be, by the way, or where they should be. We leave that to your discretion. But to empower this, we think that the district plan should focus development on established patterns and community choices. Where are people already choosing these centres? If the smaller centres are governed by consistent neighbourhood centre zone parameters, then the services in the prime locations will be less fragmented. So thank you for our joint presentation. Can I just echo the things we're asking for? No high rise in Kandala. We will contribute ample development through medium density. Should you disagree with that though, we echo that height must be a height with no city outcomes modifications, please. We want 12-metre Kandala centre height limit, which gives ample scope to increase its current effectiveness, because it's much smaller than that right now. The 11-metre residential development surrounding our centre would support ample propagation growth. But should you disagree, we want a 5-minute catchment around our centre due to the dispersion of the services that we have referred to, so that it doesn't turn into 30 minutes walking. Finally, Kandala to be a neighbourhood centre zone surrounded by MRZ-R1 with rules and design guides to ensure that great outcomes are achieved and bad ones are effective. And the last thing, we do have 2 heritage buildings in our centre. We don't want them dominated out of existence. We've already seen 12-metre development that's really rather bulky and it detracts from the Kandala Town Hall. Thank you. My presentation.
Just in respect of the integration, there's a couple of mechanisms we have instituted to ensure that we do talk to each other in terms of the issue that Ms. Ward raised around that. And we've got overlapping panel members for starters. And the chair is taking cognizance of all the deliberations and things to ensure there's a degree of integration. And we will have a wrap-up hearing too, which will also look at that integration issue as well.
That's a question about that. I mean, a lot of the wrap-up session seems to be about you presenting what your conclusions you're coming to. Am I reading that correctly?
No, it's more about wrapping up outstanding issues, things that have been information sought in that previous hearings. And a key focus of the wrap-up hearing will be around design guides. And there's a whole work stream going on at the moment to try and bring the design guides into a consistent structure and format, etc. And then we will provide submitters who have submitted on design guides to have a chance to comment.
Cool. So that's brilliant. So we'll look forward to coming back then. Thank you for your reassurance.
Right, good. Questions from the panel?
Couple of things. Firstly, for Mr. Niven. Yeah, I presume we're going to have a discussion tomorrow about the outcomes mechanism that is being proposed. But I was very interested in your comment about what other techniques there may be beyond planning standards to actually achieve the good things that you recognise within the current city outcomes contributions, which are focused on things like Green Star buildings or Home Star buildings, provision of open space, provision of laneways where it's possible, practical and appropriate, plus also affordable housing or assisted housing, I think is the term is. But I'd just be interested now so we can, in terms of a view about what other techniques are available, firstly to us, and then secondly in the wider council ambit.
I guess my comments related to that come from my experience working for, central government, Victorian central government for 10 years. The creativity of city government in terms of what it can influence is pretty widespread. Is it exploited very frequently? No. In other words, it isn't very common to find what I would call an entrepreneurial focus in terms of all the ways that the city government touches its urban area. I've seen extremely effective publicity campaigns and competition approach used by the Victorian government to influence the development community in terms of how they thought about delivering certain kind of things that they were unfamiliar with or unwilling to provide in general terms. What I would say is the power of persuasion backed by city government or by, in this case, state government, is quite considerable. I've seen those range of things, which include competitions, include advocacy, include a whole range of things. Getting the development community together and working with them in a powerful way, where they know that by engaging in that way, they were going to get an easier run in terms of getting development up in the city. I've seen the practical effects of that, and it works. So what I'm really suggesting is that not focusing on the planning system, because there are definite constraints in terms of asking for mandatory delivery, and Dr. Zamani has pointed that out. I'm well aware of that. I wasn't thinking of that. I was thinking of something outside the planning system, where city government becomes creative and innovative in the way it goes about pursuing these outcomes. Giving you the chapter and verse of a program that might do that is difficult, because there could be a variety of things. Although I know it is possible, and it does have effect. Is it used as a technique in this city? There probably were times, I could think of 30 years ago, when that was possible, because there was the focus and the aptitude and the energy to be able to look at things like that beyond the planning system. I think that could be recovered again if the city chose to took that route. What I'm saying is that from what I can see here, it doesn't seem to even consider that as a possibility. It's tried to bring everything into this mechanism, and as I said to you before, the mechanism misses an awful lot of stuff for something that's regarded as being a pervasive quality, important pervasive qualities of city development.
And we've had a number of submitters that have equally criticised the city outcomes contribution on the basis that, and I think you alluded to it in your evidence, and that it only hits those property developers who want to go above a certain height threshold. So what do you do in terms of those which are below, but still providing substantial development capacity?
I mean, the other uncertainty in that is that it's up to the developer what they choose to emphasise out of that menu of goods. They could completely avoid some of those things just because of their own decision making. The decision making about what is selected and what is proposed for points is in the developer's hands. It's not in the city's hands. So once again, this incredibly important strategic series of objectives for the city doesn't have the clout that you would expect for something to be even-handedly developed as qualities of the city, commensurate with the city's objectives.
Okay, well, we might explore that a little bit more tomorrow, I think.
Can I ask a good question, Mr. Dash, on that, just point out? And that is that height isn't the only property of the development that's been on the table, is it? So presumably, if you could tie outcomes to other properties, so that like its overall size, the number of units being developed, etc.
Okay, all right. If we can get back down to a Kandala focus now, from what is has been raised as a consistent issue with that. In terms of Kandala, I'd be interested in your view in terms of the hierarchy of centres and where that actually sits, and that's been a point made by all three of you. You have obviously the city centre and the metro centres and so forth, and then Kāinga, for example, thinks there needs to be a town centre relating to Newtown, Miramar and Tawa. They are the next biggest ones, and then you drop down to your local centres such as Karori Island Bay, and Kandala's included in one of those, with the neighbourhood centres being focused on really the old corner shops, if you like, or the corner block of shops, which have very much, dairy, hairdresser, fish and chip shop, that sort of thing, which are very much dedicated to those in the locality. Kandala itself it's bigger than that corner shop area. It provides, you've got a supermarket, you've got a chemist, you've got, there's a doctor's surgery and so forth in relatively close proximity. Got a few comparison retail shops, you've got some cafes and so forth, as well as the town hall and very much as the focal centre. But in terms of Wellington City and the hierarchy that we do have, be interested in your views about what constitutes a local centre and what constitutes a neighbourhood centre, because it does have implications, and I think all three of you have alluded to that in terms of the residential density which surrounds each of those centres. So I welcome your views.
We'll take a turn.
The idea of centre, whether it's neighbourhood or local or whatever, is nevertheless a strong idea. In other words, I suggest it's more even at a neighbourhood scale than just a corner store. It's got a kind of a social dynamic around the idea of centre. In other words, it's got enough in it to draw people. Whether that catchment is local or whether it's wider than that is probably, I think that's a legitimate area to explore, and it's a legitimate part of the definitions that have been used. Julie's made the point that the on the ground intel here has suggested that in fact Kandala does have a local focus in terms of its catchment, rather than being a wider scope than that. So then I come back to my point I made before about, so what is this place like physically? What is it like? How does the centre express itself physically? Is it a concentrated thing? Is it a dispersed thing? Is it a really low scale thing? And how long has it been like that? That the longevity of these centres relates to the way they're perceived and understood and enjoyed, and or whatever. So I find that particular determination of the taxonomy of centres is missing from the assessment or the definitions that have been provided. And it disturbs me that it is, because it's an important people component of the way these areas are seen. It really doesn't, it bears some relationship to the degree that density can be absorbed by the centres. Wellington is a city defined by topography, more so than many other cities. And so that topography can either assist or make it more difficult for density to become an integrated thing in a centre. I think in Kandala, you don't have that topography to quite the same degree as you would have, for example, in Kelvin or places like that. But I would have expected that to have been some accounting of that as in terms of an understanding of place. And I didn't find that in the document.
Here we go. First of all,
Sorry, can I just do a follow-up quick question before we move on? Is it fair to say that there is a distinction between those centres which are perhaps located and quite legibly located on arterial routes itself? Because my observation with Kandala is, if you're travelling and you want to go to Kandala Town Centre and you're not familiar with it, it's actually quite hard to navigate yourself into and out of where you actually want to go without going on a road which takes you off where you don't want to be.
absolutely.
So it's in terms of the legibility of the town centre, or the centre that is Kandala, is its legibility from, no, that's probably the wrong word, but is its location and for other people to be able to find it to actually enjoy that service, is that an important factor in the difference between something which is entirely a neighbourhood centre focus and something which is a bit wide? Because Kandala's a big suburb. There's you know, in terms of land area, it covers a quite large area. So I'd be interested in your views on that.
Can I go and answer your question? But first of all, I'd just like to observe that all the features and amenities you listed of Kandala are there in Nio. Their grocery store is smaller, but then they have some extra things on top of that. So that's the essence of what we would answer. And I would say that the corner shop is not the thing to push the neighbourhood centre down to, but the focus on the fact that the local centre is supposed to be serving a catchment and drawing people. And I would support what you say about the not only its accessibility has to be there, it has to be reachable from further away and identified. And we've shown that actually you don't see that in the Kandala Centre Business Improvement District data. It's not there. Does that help?
Well, yeah, it does, but I'd be interested in what Mr. Niven's got to say on that.
I think it's difficult. I think as a centre, it's one of the few that's difficult to miss. I'm sorry, pardon me, you can miss it. I know this from trying to find it on numerous occasions, even though I knew where it was. So when you come up the gorge, there's no indication of where there's even a centre there when you reach the top of the gorge and you're in the middle of Kandala. You have to go searching to find it. If you're travelling north-south or south-north, Johnsonville and Macrory, that kind of route, you actually don't go through it. You glance right past it. So I think that's actually, I mean, if I was determining one of the physical sense of place qualities of the Kandala Centre, I would say difficult to find would be one of those characteristics.
I think probably the other point that I would make in terms of services is that, you know, we don't have that much of an exceptional fish and chip shop that people are actually going to divert from another suburb to come to our fish and chip shop. The hairdressers are pretty much booked up with their local clients, and so, you know, the kind of services that you're talking about, the fish and chip shop, the hairdresser, the dairy, we no longer have a post shop. It has now closed, which is actually a downgrading from what we've had before. And we did have, we have a restaurant outside the centre and we have a pub. We had another evening restaurant, which has now closed and turned into only a daytime cafe. So there's very limited things that anybody from outside the area is going to come there for. It's really only local people that it serves.
Okay.
We had a day visiting sites the other day, and we came to Kandala. We visited and we had a cup of tea. Yeah, so we had a walk around. But so I've listened very carefully to your discussion. The other day we had Friends of Kandala, and I don't know if there's any crossover between the two groups, but you'd be pleased to say you're singing the same song, although Mr. Jenkins thought that he decided that there should be horizontal development rather than vertical. And he thought that the commercial area of Kandala should be enlarged so that the whole of Ganges Road and Decker Street was rezoned to commercial. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I don't know how the people who live in the residences along that street would receive that, but I suspect they'd be going to the Residents Association to complain, really. I mean, we're not against the area being extended if there's a really good reason to do that, but I would say rather than just write a pen through the district plan, it needs to be considered when people are coming along with a commercial proposition that makes sense for the village, really. And therefore, an ordinary resource consent type of change would be the basis for doing that.
And I think in some ways, as I said about the difference between the theoretical and practical, if we look at Kandala New World is applying to try and get more car parking, ironically, but they have owned 2 of those properties and have had to hold 2 of those properties that they want to rezone for over 10 years before they could get the 3rd property in order to do what they want to do. So I sort of think that really you would be having to look at, once somebody had acquired the property, then they could apply for it to be rezoned as commercial, but that the opportunity to acquire the properties really makes it pretty academic.
The only comment I'd make is about what you just said is that the emphasis on horizontal development, that reads to me to be what I'm talking about with that 4-story scale.
That's what I said. You were singing
Yes,
partly the same song.
we are thinking that, certainly.
Yeah.
It's just a question of timing.
Yeah, so they thought that should be the 12-metre
They did. Yeah.
height limit in the centre rather than the 22 that's proposed. Thank you, that's all I had.
Just a very quick one in terms of getting my head around what the relief is that you are seeking, because I've heard different things. So am I right to say that it's the 12 metres that you want to have in the centre?
Correct.
And the 11 metres outside of the centre?
Yes. Correct.
All right, that's all I needed.
It's currently in the section 42A reports, 18 metres in the centre, and there is a catchment, which we haven't had the chance to really discuss. So you're asking for 5 minutes of 14 metres around that. That's the section 42A.
So it's going at the moment 18, 14, 11, whereas we're saying really that the 14, my strong feeling is that the 14 is not needed, especially because if we go back to the original spatial plan, when there was the idea of having slightly higher around the centre, there was no NDRS. So beyond the 14 metres, it was going to be 2 stories right to the edge. But now the whole suburb can be 3 stories.
As today said, it's quite a large suburb area, so that's a lot of increase in density.
In regards to the in regards to the differentiation of the centre and the surrounding residential, are you happy with that 1 metre? Particularly, we've been there, I saw it. I also know how easy, how difficult it is to find it. Would the visibility of it be better with slightly higher centre or lower surroundings?
I would have thought that a 4-story scale, achieved to contribute to the density component of the centre is likely to be better seen, but probably not to quite the same, but probably not to an extreme end.
I would have thought that if you're driving through the main road from Johnsonville to Crofton Downs, in terms of visibility, that we've got a 12-metre building there now. I don't think that you can see that from Box Hill. So I don't think in terms of people further away, who are, you know, so if we're trying to attract people from outside, that is going to be any more visible. And I guess if you live there, you kind of work it out really quickly, don't you?
Yeah. It's a very narrow street in a northwesterly south direction, and so as soon as you start talking about going up to 18 metres, then there's a huge wind component that we are nervous about, as well as the dominance of our two historic buildings.
Thanks very much for that.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. One is that I don't know if you had the chance to listen to Mr. Jenkins the other Monday. One assertion he put to us was that Kandala is a destination centre. A lot of people travel from within one of the city to get there.
Well, I discussed that with him,
Yeah,
because he is actually on my committee. And he thinks that the TP shop in the town centre is an example of a destination. It's a boutique store, really. He's talking about destination retail being boutique stores.
right.
If you look at the bid data and what's in Julie's report, you will see that no significant transaction value is being had from outside of the local area. So it's not a destination centre in the sense that a lot of people are travelling a long way to get to Kandala. That's data does not support that.
Thank you. You'd probably be pleased to know we probably don't have any scope if we wanted to horizontally rezone.
No.
That hasn't been suggested.
Yes. But just on the growth thing, I mean, one role of a district plan is to provide and enable further growth. And if I compare Kandala, because I used to live in Nio and Kandala at one stage, if you compare it to the Nio is very much a string kind of centre on a main road, busy main road, and Crofton Downs is Crofton Downs, whereas Kandala does have a sort of a main street kind of village centre kind of feel to it from my own viewpoint.
That's because it's off the beaten track, so it doesn't have one of the major. There are only two routes out of Wellington, and one of them goes through Nio, right? Well, if you actually, as you've been there, you know that most of it's one story.
Yeah.
Right. So the ability to go to 4 stories is actually a significant increase in the capability for the centre.
Well, and there has been potential for it to be able to go up for a long time, for which there does not seem to have been any appetite.
It's actually owned by 3 people. Well, plus foodstuffs.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Any further questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation and your effort.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, because when you give us your active questions and everything, it really helps us feel, yes, this is a process where you're listening to what we've got to say.
Well, I will say that I was thinking before, we will be looking very closely at the evidence before us in terms of the appropriate zoning, appropriate height.
Appreciate you doing that.
Thank you.
And on that note, the hearing will be adjourned for the day, and we will resume tomorrow. It's 9 o'clock, I believe. Just checking my.
Listen to the third one.
Yes. It's 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So the hearing will be adjourned until tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
Yep.